Hi, I'm Dr. Kimberly Moore, host of the Envision More Workforce Insight podcast. Join us as we explore workforce and leadership through an innovation lens with leaders from across the country in every industry. Whether you're in education trying to crack the code for workforce or industry seeking to address your workforce talent strategy, or maybe you just need to be inspired, we've got you covered. Tune in, save us as a favorite, and let's innovate together. Welcome to another episode of the Workforce Insights podcast, powered by Envision More Consulting Group, where we bring your bold visions to life. I am so excited to have another great conversation on tap for you. You know, we are always talking about the 4 areas that we focus on. Of course, that's private industry, that's education, nonprofits, and government. But there's an intersection, and there are lots of entities that I believe serve as the glue to connecting all these pieces. And I think today's conversation, you will definitely understand why I have this amazing leader with us today. And that's none other than Michelle Van Noy. My goodness, with Rutgers University. It's such a pleasure to have you here. And just to level set with the audience, I think the first question I'll jump into is just tell us briefly about your journey in becoming the leader of the Education and Employment Research Center, and we'll refer to it as EERC, along the way at Rutgers University School of Management and Labor Relations. You know, really, what was your journey and what drives your passion for, this research that really serves as the intersection between work and education?
Oh, thank you so much for having me today and being part of this discussion. This is a really wonderful opportunity to share our work. And, the work that we do at EERSC is something I've been engaged in for quite some time in my career. I always started off with an interest in education and how education can promote opportunity for people in their lives, and also find meaning in terms of the work that they engage in. I started this work many years ago, doing research at Mathematica Policy Research. At that time, we were doing a lot of research on transitions to work, whether it be school to work, welfare to work, and a whole series of studies that were looking at various transitions for different groups of people to find meaningful work. And that shaped my interest. I learned about community colleges through that work and became interested in the role of the community college, and that's how I ended up my next step at Columbia University, where I worked at the Community College Research Center while I was working on my doctorate, and really became immersed in the role that community colleges play in helping to shape people's lives and trajectories with preparing for the workforce and thinking about their lives. And so that's a work that's carried over into the work that I've done at Rutgers. And I think that as you know, the EERC studies all kinds of topics related to that intersection between education and work. We do a good amount of work with community colleges. We also have been doing a lot of work looking at credentials and a host of other topics that I know we'll get into today. But I think my interest in research has always been to think about how it can improve policy and practice, and ultimately improve the lives of people.
I love that. I talk about passion driven work, mission driven work. It is powerful. And honestly, that's how we had an opportunity to meet as well on that community college side of it. And certainly I knew from the very beginning that this was someone that really was committed to the cause and making it better. And I think it's a great segue to thinking about your work now at the EERC and its focus on so many different areas you mentioned. I mean, whether it's student choices and pathways, or STEM and technician education, or non-credit education and non-degree credentials, community college innovation. I mean, literally, it could just be all these commas. I don't even know how we have time today to even speak. There's just so many things that you're doing. But how do these areas intersect and contribute to the broader economy?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of these things, there's so many areas in which we work, and so we try and organize them around some topical areas, but they all certainly are interconnected. We look at sort of the student level experience in terms of how they navigate all the pathways that are out there in education and in the economy. So that's kind of our student choices and pathways. And then, we look at sort of some of the more systematic level issues around kind of the structure of the labor market and how education connects with the labor market. We focus on particular institutions like community colleges and what they're doing to innovate. And of course, there's so much going on. In different subfields like STEM and technician education that feeds into the community colleges and feeds into student pathways. And then, of course, lately there's been so much interest in non-credit education and non-degree credentials, a topic that I've been studying for a number of years. And so we certainly have a lot of focus there. And that intersects with many other of these areas in terms of how students navigate those pathways and how community colleges approach them. So there's a lot of overlap and intersection in the topics that we focus on.
I love it. And I think, let's probably delve just a little bit into the student choices and pathways. How do the choices that students make in their education and career pathways impact their long term success in the workforce? That's becoming more and more of a conversation about, the value of the college experience, the university experience. And so, talk about that and what can institutions and policymakers do to support informed decision making in that regard?
Yeah, so we actually just completed a very long study, multi-year study, looking at how students navigate decisions around programs and careers. This was focused in the community college sector, looking at IT. So there's a lot more on our website. I'll try and just highlight a couple of main things there. I mean, I think we recognize the complexity of student decisions around what to study. There's an important role of their friends and family in influencing their thinking, and certainly their own experiences as they go through life help shape what they're interested in. Even the role of hobbies, for example, in the field of IT can really impact students in terms of what they might enjoy doing and aspire to do. And then I think, of course, we've uncovered from the research that a lot of students really do rely on institutions to get information about the programs that they pursue, as well as the potential career options. And so it really is incumbent on colleges and institutions to make sure that their information is up to date and accessible. And also, we've observed some different strategies within colleges around how they structure advising to have, people who are accessible, who have good information about careers, whether it be faculty members who maybe have connections, with the field, with employers, and then have advisors that are more specific to certain career areas. So there's a lot more that you can find on our website around some of those topics, but I think those are some of the key issues and areas that came up from some of that research.
I love that. Is there anything that you point to relative to policymakers? Is there anything that policymakers can glean from this?
Well, I mean, certainly the role of funding is important in terms of making sure there's adequate resources for advising. That is always a challenge for institutions. And I think that's something that certainly comes up, especially in the area of non-credit, because in many places there's sort of our lack of funds that colleges can draw from to support the proper advising of students pursuing those kinds of pathways.
Certainly. And I think another, again, and so many hot topics that you have in just one area. But when I think about STEM and technician education and just the crucial role that it plays in preparing, individuals for high demand careers and really, kind of more inclusive too of how do you get people that might otherwise not be in there and get them engaged. How does your research in this area address workforce needs and promote equity and quality in education? And even contribute to the economic development.
Yeah. Well, I think as you know from being on our advisory board for our one project that's looking at the role of technician education in community colleges and economic development, I think that's certainly one of many areas that I think is really important, and where we're trying to help illuminate kind of what's happening, and push those questions a little bit further through understanding more what roles these programs in colleges can play in thinking about creating more economic opportunity and generating more economic activity within regions. And so we certainly have been learning a lot from the colleges we've been studying in that area, looking at the ways that they think about structuring just how they approach their education and training programs to really align with both employer needs as well as student needs in terms of pathways and career opportunities. But then beyond the sort of traditional kinds of programs that they structure, to also think about how colleges can work directly with businesses to support their growth and sustainability, as well as to be engaged in broader regional conversations and convenings, and in some cases take on a leadership role within a region around development of particular industries to either bring in industry or support existing industry and develop into new areas. So there's a lot of exciting work happening in that area, a lot of federal funding, we know from the CHIPS Act. There's things that are happening in many regions. And I think we're just trying to understand what colleges are doing and what some of the potential impacts are of that work. So
I love that work, and it's been certainly my pleasure to be a part of it. But I thought it was extremely important for our Workforce Insight listeners just to understand, because sometimes, whether it's private sector or other industries or sectors, they just don't or may not appreciate how much work is going into the education piece to understand what is needed in order to not only have their businesses thrive, but really that there is great intentionality behind making sure that there is an available workforce. So I love this project and the work that's being done. And if I would encourage you to definitely go to Michelle's website and get as much information as you possibly can. There are some wonderful, wonderful reports out there. And again, thinking about all those pieces of workforce and non-credit education, skilled, how do we, move from this to the skills based economy, really non-degree credentials, top of everybody's mind. Everybody's trying to figure this out. This is an area that you're working in. So it's becoming increasingly important. One, looking at this evolving labor market, could you discuss the significance of non traditional education pathways and credentials and how it provides opportunities for workforce participation and even advancement?
yeah, I mean, I think that's a big open question. We've been trying to understand better the nature of the different kinds of non-credit programs and non-degree credentials that are available. There's certainly a lot of interest, I think, among public and among policymakers around kind of these opportunities for shorter term uh, training and preparation for careers. And I think there's what we were seeing from the research so far is that there's a lot of variation in terms of the outcomes here. So a lot of this varies depending on the local labor market, depends on the field of study. There's a lot of variation in terms of industry, in terms of the quality of the jobs that people can get through this kind of education. But I think certainly one of the things that we're also trying to understand is also the sort of the goals of the programs and the goals of the students in the program. So are the people who pursue non-credit education or non-degree credentials, are they seeking these programs to sort of get a foothold into the labor market, to enter into a new occupation, or how much of it is to advance or to improve skill development within their current career? And I think both of those things happen, among other things, as well as even just career exploration through some of these programs. There's a lot of different things that are happening here, and each of them are significant in potentially different ways in terms of how they can contribute to someone's career development and advancement. So part of what we're doing at this point is somewhat foundational in terms of understanding just the nature of these programs and credentials.
I love it. And a lot of that work being driven by community colleges. So when you think about, again, community colleges at the forefront of innovation and education, how does your research on community college innovation contribute to improving like the educational outcomes, fostering workforce development, and even strengthening local economies? How does that help?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're always interested in all the work we do in terms of in partnering with colleges that are thinking about how to improve what they're doing, and we do a fair amount of evaluation work where we work with colleges that are seeking to try out new kinds of approaches to engaging students and preparing students for the labor market. So, for example, right now we're finishing up an evaluation of an apprenticeship program that one school was developing. We have a long history of doing research and evaluation in the TACT grant program that was a big thing over the past decade. And so really trying to highlight specific practices that come out of those kinds of efforts to help the field more broadly. And certainly there's just so much going on in the community college sector that we want to learn from and try to sort of facilitate the sharing of. We are right now taking on a lead role in STEM research network. We have the Community College STEM network, which is a hub that's bringing together researchers and practitioners around student pathways in STEM fields for high achieving, academically talented low income students who are interested in STEM fields. And so that's another way that we're looking at sort of some of the practices that are innovative within colleges and trying to highlight them and share them, within a network and foster conversation about that.
I love that. And oftentimes with education, and we've talked about it in some of our meetings too, just this whole alignment, education programs and workforce needs. So how does EERC facilitate connections between education and labor market to promote, economic growth and prosperity? How does that happen?
Yeah. Well, one of the areas of research that, there's a variety of different things we've done in that area, but I will talk about one project that we finished up over the past year, which was looking at how colleges and universities, this is 2-year and 4-year institutions, use labor market information. And so, when we say labor market information, that can include a variety of sources from real-time jobs data to sort of traditional sources of Department of Labor information to wage records data and analyses that have been increasingly done in states to surveys, local surveys of employers, and conversations with employers around their needs. So there's a lot of different kinds of labor market information that are out there, and that's one of the things we learned from our study is really that institutions can find it very helpful and do find it helpful to use multiple sources of labor market information when trying to understand their labor market. So not just relying only on one source, but trying to bring together multiple sources, recognizing that there are benefits and of each type, and each kind can inform the work in different ways. We also see, I do think that in this area, there's quite a lot of activity happening within community colleges. And sort of in terms of within higher ed institutions, that's where we see a lot of activity, although we do see other institutions that are also increasingly interested in how labor market information can help guide what they do, what their programs look like, how they serve students, how they advise students, just a whole variety of different questions can be informed by those data. That's another place where we do have several reports that are out on our website that get into more detail in terms of both case studies of what colleges have done, as well as a national survey of what colleges and universities are doing in that area.
Again, for the listeners, Workforce Insight listeners, again, this is such a go-to place, and I wanted to make sure that I did not just keep it to myself, that I shared it with each of you. Again, whether you're in private industry, whether you're education, whether you're nonprofit or your government, all of this information, how it's collected, it is so intentional and so much with the pulse right on what's happening throughout our nation. So please don't miss out on the opportunity to go to the website, look at those reports, a wealth of information. They certainly are my go-to resource. And none of this, when I think about the work that you're doing, Michelle, and your amazing team, because it's a team behind you with this. Some of these great initiatives and projects, it's all through collaboration, with industry partners and educational institutions or policymakers. Is there one initiative or project that, you've undertaken that just stands out, that you really like, this is the hallmark of all projects today?
Well, I don't know. That's like asking me to pick a favorite child.
I
So
know, right? Hopefully, yeah.
I can tell you that we do have one very exciting thing that our work has really evolved into is working with a lot of networks. And so, I mentioned the community college STEM network is one great network of people we're bringing together. We've also been doing that in the non-credit and non-degree credential area. So one exciting initiative that we just recently launched is the non-credit research collaborative, which is a group of researchers, national leaders in non-credit research. We've been working together on some projects, and now are kind of aligning some of our work. We have a website that we have recently launched, which is kind of a really nice repository of all the research that we've done in non-credit, and just some general information and FAQ on the topic. So that's a very exciting thing. And then, similar to that, we also have been co-leading the non-degree credential research network. That's something we just joined as a co-lead in the past year. I'm working with partners at GW University, so we're very excited about being involved in that as well. So a lot of really cool things going on, and really very excited about these opportunities to bring together folks around our research. And I also shouldn't forget, another favorite child is our state non-credit data project, where we've been really lucky to bring together together, a great group of folks from states around the country that are interested in collecting non-credit data and sort of sharing practices with each other. So we have a very vibrant group of folks that get together every quarter to talk about data questions around non-credit, and really learning a lot from engaging with that group as well. So I'm sorry I didn't follow your lead here in just one, but we do have a lot of
No,
exciting.
I love it. I mean, I think the listeners will hear both your excitement and my interest and passion in this area and why it's such a resource that everyone should know about. The website should be, should absolutely be on your marked favorites. Okay. So, Michelle, in your opinion, what are some of the key strategies that policymakers and educational leaders can implement when it comes to strengthening the connection between education and labor market? Certainly in the context of rapid technological advancements and economic shifts, because I would tell anybody thinking about where we were before COVID and where we are now, and this need for speed, for accelerated development of talent. What would you suggest are some strategies that policymakers and education leaders could be thinking about in that regard?
That's a good question. I mean, of course, I think while a lot of this is moving quickly, we also do want to be reflective on what we're doing, and take the time to do the research, and to kind of think about the implications of the various strategies that we take in that area. And I know that really important consideration, of course, is as we move forward with any intervention, is to think through the different trade-offs in terms of access and equity, because some of the things that are being done can kind of go both ways, and so it's really important to think through various policies and their implications, and none of it's very simple. So I think I guess as a researcher, we have the benefit of talking about things in nuance, and policymakers have to make hard decisions about what to do. I mean, I think the current discussions around short-term Pell and how to sort through what credentials are quality and are not, those are very difficult decisions. And I do think it is important to try and keep nuance in the discussion around the role of low wage work and improving job quality and questions like that, and so to kind of keep the broader context of the labor market and the occupational structure in these conversations around education, because I think if we get too far apart from understanding the foundations of the labor market, we lose sight of the bigger picture. So I think kind of keeping that voice there is important. But there are many, good strategies that are promising strategies that are out there that, I think we're testing and we're trying to understand. So.
I love it. Again, just such great work underway. And now I'm going to ask you, as we move to what would be the close of our conversations, your crystal ball, looking ahead. What do you envision as the future of education and workforce development, and what role will EERC contribute to that?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I hope that our research can help guide practice and policy, and help guide thinking around some of these important questions. We certainly recognize the importance of just the kinds of questions that we're asking in terms of framing the discussion, and helping to generate the research base that can help inform decision making as things go forward. There's a lot of big questions out on the table about the role of education. We have the skills-based hiring movement, which is raising some very interesting questions. We have non-degree credentials, and sort of thinking about alternative pathways to careers. And a lot of these things can go in many different directions. And I think we're very interested in just helping to provide research to help inform the direction of any of these multitude of sort of policy decisions and directions that could go forward in terms of the future of higher ed, and the future of education, and the future of work. And things are happening very quickly. I mean, even as we talked about the role of AI, you mentioned, I mean, things like that are just happening so rapidly. And so we want to, continue to stay on the pulse of where things are going, and help, again, kind of be an informed voice in these discussions.
Well, I have no doubt that you will certainly keep your finger on the pulse of all things that are going on. And I cannot let you leave this virtual interview without the question that I've asked every leader. I mean, such a storied career, very, when I think about impactful work that you've had, could you give us the best piece of advice that you received along the way relative to your journey and kind of shaping your leadership perspective?
Oh my gosh. Best piece of advice.
Yeah.
That's a great question. I mean, I think certainly I'm trying to think of advice. I certainly have had role models I've looked up to, and so that certainly comes to mind when you ask that question. I think of people that I met, certainly worked with at CCRC. Tom Bailey was a great visionary leader I look up to quite a bit in terms of being very collaborative and listening to the voices of everybody around him and helping to provide really great intellectual leadership. So I look very much towards that as a model of inspiration, and certainly also someone like Jim Jacobs really informed my thinking about the importance of trying to be connected to policy and to practice and to really listen to folks that are in the field doing the work that we are trying to inform, and so the importance of maintaining connection to that. So I think those are, I don't know, it doesn't exactly answer your question, but the
I
first thing.
think it does. I think it does. I love that you point to people who are modeling what you'd like to see. I mean, because again, advice is advice, but when you see it in action, it's even more powerful. So, Michelle, I certainly want to thank you for our conversation today. And I also want to thank our listeners for continuing to build not only the interest, but for liking and sharing and certainly subscribing to Workforce Insight. This is the go to for making those connections. And as always, thank you for joining us and see you next time. Thanks for tuning in to the Workforce Insight podcast, powered by Envision More Consulting Group, where we bring your bold visions to life. Remember to subscribe, share, and stay tuned for more insights on navigating the world of workforce and leadership. Until the next time, be bold, be great, and let's innovate.